Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to Oxygen for the Soul. This week's parasha is Parashat Vayehi. It is the last of the parashiot that are read in the book of Bereshit, the book of Genesis. It ends actually on a kind of sad note where we speak about the death of Yosef, the death of Yaakov, but we say chazak v'nitchazek, that we recognize that life continues to go on, that we find strength even in places of sadness and sorrow, that each of us are here today as a result of the things that happened in our past, and we find ourselves with the ability to choose to strengthen ourselves because of our past, and not to allow ourselves to become somewhat spoiled or depressed or unhappy because of our past. Okay, so the parsha begins with this Yaakov. His life is coming to an end. We know that the parasha tells us a little bit that that Yaakov is on his deathbed and that he wants to reveal the kits. The Chachamim tell us the end of times to his children. He wants to give them an idea as to what's going to happen at the end of time. He wants to give them the ability to overcome the great challenges that they are going to overcome, hopefully, or face in the generations to come. Remember that this is different. Up until now, Yaakov is a man who is a descendant of Abraham, who is the father of monotheism. He has taken on the mantle of teaching the world what it means to be a Jew, what it means to be a believer in God. And what he did was uniquely different than his grandfather. Whereas Abraham was looking to teach the masses, over here Yaakov was interested in teaching his family. He was interested in giving his family access to this information and allowing the world to change through them. You and I, listening to this class today, we are the, so to speak, the pallbearers of these ideas. We carry the message of Yaakov. We carry the message of Abraham to the world, to the masses, and it's through us. And this is what the Pesukim later in the Torah tell us when they say to be a mamlechet kohanim or an or l'goyim, to be a nation of priests, and to be a light unto the nation. We are fulfilling that by expressing the best of ourselves. And through our achievements, through our success, and I'm not talking about monetary success, I'm not talking about your business success, I'm talking about your inner successes as a human being. When you work on being a better, greater human being, that is when the world around you recognizes that you are a Ben Yisrael or a Bat Yisrael or Bet Yaakov, that you are part of a people that are growing, developing, thinking, members of a tribe that are trying to bring good into a world which all too often feels like it's a world of darkness. So it says, Vayikra Yaakov el banav. Yaakov calls over to his children, Vayomer, and he says to them, Hosifu, come gather, V'agida lechem, come gather around me, and I will tell you, Et asher yikra etchem ba'achrit hayamim, I will tell you what's going to happen at the end of times. Okay, Bikish legalot et haketz, Rashi tells us. He wants to reveal the ketz, the end. Okay, we know from the original dream that Yaakov had with the angels going up and down the ladder, and that he saw that this ladder was so far, Bashamayim was so far away. We understood there's three different types of exiles, and the last exile, which is the one that you and I are in right now, is the longest. And he is trying to reveal everything that's about to happen, and somehow something gets derailed. Hikvitzu v'yishmu b'nei Yisrael v'yishmu et Yisrael avichem. Gather and listen, the sons of Yaakov. Listen to your father. And he goes through each one of the Shvatim, which is what I'm not going to do right now. He goes to Reuven, Bechori, Et Kochi, Reshit, Oni, Yeter. He talks about Reuven, his firstborn son, my strength, my namesake, I have to mention him. You should have been, he says, Oni Yeter, you should have been a superior in rank, Se'et Yeter Az, superior in rank and superior in power. And for some reason, we know his story, which is a kind of a sad story. Reuven loses his ability to grow and develop himself for two times. One is when he interferes with the placement of his mother's bed, and number two is when he had the ability of saving Yosef and bringing Yosef out of the pit and bringing him home. And instead, what does he do? He says, I'll do it later. By the time he gets back, the brothers already sold him. The Chachamim tell us if Yosef would have known that these psukim would have been written about him, he would have rushed, he would have ran to pull Yosef out of the pit, which is an important message for ourselves. Do not procrastinate. Procrastination is the worst thing. There is a book that is going to be written about each one of us. Okay, and if we recognize that this book is going to be told about our stories, about our actions, you would not waste a moment of time in any moment of the day. Everything you would do would be like yashar, because you know that your actions actually count and they matter. Okay, so he goes ahead, he gives a little bit of tochacha to Shimon and Levi. We learned, by the way, from Shimon and Levi about what it means to be a man. Shimon was given a sword at 13, and that's where the bar mitzvah idea comes from. But I want to kind of fast forward all of the Shvatim, and I want to get to something that happens over here at the end. Okay, he goes through Gad, Naphtali, and all of these, by the way, definitely worth reading through the Pesukim because they are so deep. There's so much here as far as information and wisdom. Okay, he calls over this guy Daniel is trying to get in, and I don't know why he can't get in, but this is like the sixth time. He calls over Ephraim and Menashe. Yaakov calls over Ephraim and Menashe, and he's interested in blessing them, but and this happens before he calls the brothers over. He calls over Ephraim and Menashe, and he says to them, where can I find it? It's in here, 48:20. Admit, and he says like this. He says, "Vayom Yosef el Aviv." Look, he says, "Vayar Yosef ki yashit Aviv yad yamino al rosho." He's about to place his hands on his father. Let's just go back again. V'yishlach Yisrael et yamino v'yeshet el rosho Ephraim. He goes ahead and he calls. He puts his hand on the head of Ephraim and not on Menashe. He wants to give a blessing to the children. He wants to give a blessing to the children of Ephraim and Menashe. Now let's just pause for a second before we read the Pesukim. Let's kind of put this in the proper context. Ephraim and Menashe are the two names of the sons of Yosef, and they're the sons whose name we evoke on Friday night when we give a blessing to our sons. We say, Yivarecha Hashem ke'Ephraim u'Menashe. You should be blessed like Ephraim and Menashe. And the question is, why are we blessing our children like Ephraim and Menashe? Right? There's so many other brothers in history. Why not like Reuven and Shimon? Why not like Shimon and Levi? Why not any of the other brothers that are out there? And the answer is because if you look at the story of the Torah itself, where there's lots of brothers, there's lots of sibling rivalry, lots of pain, lots of drama. And what's so unique about Ephraim and Menashe is that these were two boys that were born in exile into a foreign culture, away from the land of Israel, and yet in spite of the circumstances, in spite of the different types of values and culture that they were born into, they figure out a way of maintaining a deep love and relationship. They figure out a way of communicating and loving each other irrespective of the other's accomplishments or failures, and you'll see what I mean in a minute. So Yosef tells his dad, listen, I have these sons, my sons are with me, their name is Ephraim and Menashe. So he says, amazing, Yaakov, great. He says, bring your sons to me. Yosef, Ekel Shakai, Nira Alai, Beloz Be'etz Canaan, Vivarach Oti. God came to me in the land of Canaan and he blessed me. Amazing. Vayomer Alai, Hineni mefarcha, Rebitcha, Natatcha Lakahal, Amim, Natati et Haaretz Azot, Lazarecha, Charecha, Achuzat Olam. Even though your children, he says to Yaakov, were born in exile, even though the land of Israel is going to be an inheritance for my descendants, know that your children will also have a portion in the land of Eretz Yisrael. Vata shnei benecha hanoldim lecha be'eretz Mitzrayim ad boi alecha b'Mitzrayim lihem Ephraim Menashe Reuven and Shimon. You should know that these two boys that you had, Ephraim and Menashe, are like Reuven and Shimon to me. This is a very massive accolade that Yaakov gives to Yosef, that your two sons who were born in exile, who were not born in the house of Yaakov, who did not have the yeshiva experience, who went to secular universities in Egypt for sure, but somehow maintained a very deep spiritual connection. He says they are to me like Reuven and Shimon. And what's so fascinating is that if you actually think about it for a moment, the tribes of Israel, we know there are 12 tribes. We know that Ephraim and Menashe are part of the tribe of Yosef. And we also know that the tribes of Israel were broken up after King Solomon built the temple. His children, they divided up the kingdom into two, and they were basically Yehuda and Yosef. And the other 10 tribes were lost. So here you have the children of Yosef, the children of Yehuda and Yosef were these had a complicated relationship because we know that Yehuda was responsible for selling Yosef. But I guess they made amends because the two children that actually survived the exile were the two children or the descendants of Yosef and Yehuda. They figured it out. The two kings are the ones that have children today. If you were alive today, you're either from the tribe of Yehuda or from Ephraim or a Levi, okay, which is or Kohen as well. That's all that we know today. Everyone else lost. We don't know where the other tribes are. But these two children, Ephraim and Asher, have a superior status of being from the same place as Reuven and Shimon. And the question is, how were they able to do this? So a couple of things. One is, the Gemara says as follows, it says, Mikol Adam mitkaneh chutz mibno v'talmidav. A man can be jealous of anyone in the world, but not from his children, not from his students. Right? There is no jealousy that you can have from your children or students. And the reason is very simple. It's because we want more for them. Every father's dream is for their child to surpass them, both sons and daughters, to become better than them, to be greater than them. This is part and parcel of what it means to be Jewish. You know, we think about Judaism as being a system of religion, of laws, of ideas. But at the core, if you really think about what Judaism is, it's a book about families. It's a book about building community. It's a book about raising children. It's a book about how we can be better husbands. It's a book about thinking deeply about, how I can recognize my strengths and my weaknesses and what can I do to become better. This is a story of flawed people that made mistakes, and we read about them weekly because we want to be better. I want to be greater. I am not interested in surrendering, for less, right? I want more. So you could be jealous of everyone, but no father is jealous of their children simply because we want the best for them. This is what it means to be a Jewish dad, mom. We do everything that we can to give more to our children. He says, this is the verse we say this. We bless our children to be like Ephraim and Asher because they represent two boys born in an exile without a deep connection to the land of Israel, but somehow their father, Yosef, instilled that in them. You can do it. If Yosef can do it, already, this is the spoiler alert, we say Maaseh Avot Siman Labanim, that the actions of the fathers, okay, are a sign for the children, which means in the same way that Yosef was able to raise his children in exile, raise his children in an environment which is foreign. Listen, we're Jewish. You're listening to a Parsha class on a Thursday on Zoom, okay? You guys represent like the most Jewish Jews I know. Not the most, but like you're at the top, like the top 5% of like the Jewish people on planet Earth, okay? And, it's easy to think of, I'm in America, I'm in exile, it's a secular country, what am I doing for my children? And certainly, would it be better for us to raise our kids in Israel? Would it be better to raise our kids in a more insular environment? Yes, better. But that's not necessarily ideal. And there are two types of children that we raise in this world. One is the child who is somewhat secluded and more in an insular environment. And there is merit to that. Because, I see there is definitely merit to that. That's not the way I raise my children. The way I raised my children is that I wanted my children to very much be part of the world that we are in right now. I wanted them to wrestle with the duality of their identities of being an American and being a Jew. And my job was hopefully to show them the depth, the beauty of Judaism. And I won't stop. I'll do everything for that. Meaning, the way you and I sacrifice today is not through hard labor of Egyptian slavery and to maintain our identities. The way you and I today suffer, or the way we're challenged, the way we're measured as far as fathers and mothers, is what we do to preserve our Jewish identity for our children. How much money are you willing to spend on the best schools, best camps, best experiences? That is the challenge of our generation. Many parents call me and say, Rabbi, do I really need to send my kid to yeshiva? Is it really important for the camp? It's such an extra that. I could have this, I could have that vacation, I could drive a fancier car. And I say, my friend, This is the greatest investment you can make in the world. You raise a happy, healthy, functioning Jewish kid that is a Kiddush Hashem. That is the goal. That is the gem. That is the prize. Everything else, I guarantee you will trade it. It's irrelevant, everything else. Enjoy the ability of being in a place where you can give the next generation the opportunity of having a better, brighter future. That's what we're investing in. That was Yosef's dream. Yosef, and this was Yaakov's dream. And the truth is, I was even more than that. This was Yitzchak's dream. Yitzchak saw the beauty of Esav. He recognized that here was a guy that was going to contend with the secular world. And he felt that he had a better option, Yitzchak, with Esav, of challenging the world. And Yaakov saw that in Yosef as well. Someone who was externally beautiful, someone who may have looked a little bit vain, but really had a tremendous amount of spiritual depth. Tremendous amount of spiritual clarity, right? We say, listen to what the pasuk says. Ready? This is another Gemara. It says, Amar Rabbi Yoshua. He says, Amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, Kol hamelamed ben beno Torah ma'aleh alav katuv ki'ilu kibluhu mihar Sinai. Any one of us who's able to teach Torah to our grandchildren, it's as if they received the Torah from Har Sinai. The goal, you think, is just to take care of your kids? To raise them? No. To raise our children means to be thinking about our grandchildren. What do you want your grandkids to look like? Because your kids will determine what your grandkids look like. Don't be short-sighted. When I was under my chuppah, I was praying for my grandkids. And Bezrat Hashem, when your children will go to their chuppah, you'll be at your chuppah for some of you. You're praying for your children and your grandchildren. Famous story of the chief education minister in Russia, who came to Reb Chaim Volozhin and said, when do you start teaching your children? When do you start preparing your kids for education? You know what he said? He said 20 years before they're born. Chinuch starts early. Education starts early. How early? When you're married. Now it starts. Yosef understood this. Yaakov understood this. There's a mitzvah. We have a mitzvah to care for the next generation. We have a mitzvah to go ahead and provide them the tools and the ability to go ahead and achieve what they need to achieve. But let's just segue for a minute. Ephraim and Menashe are two brothers that are somewhat in love, but we know that the brothers have a little bit of, there's still that sibling rivalry with them, right? It kind of, the Torah ends on this bittersweet note. The brothers are worried that Yosef still may hold a grudge. And despite the claims, Yosef's claims of the opposite, they're afraid that he's going to take revenge. Once Yaakov dies, Yosef's going to come out swinging and take revenge. Because how could Yosef not take revenge? So what happens, the brothers go ahead and they concoct the story that their father gave them clear instructions in their deathbed that Yosef has to forgive the brothers. Right? Now, when Yosef hears this message, he starts to cry. Why? Because he realizes that not only do the brothers not trust each other, but that this mistrust will be a undoing of our future generations about Jews in the future in history. Right? It became there's a sad joke about the Jews. There was a Jewish shipwreck, right? Who shows his rescuers around the island. And they made him a home for the last 20 years. And he tells them, is there a synagogue that you pray in every single day? And he says, yeah. He's like, there is. He's like, but I won't step into that synagogue. Right? Because if there's one Jew or there's two Jews, there's three opinions. If there's two Jews, there's three synagogues. Right? But they didn't sell Yosef into slavery. Right? Any other, because they loved him. They sold him because they saw him as a threat. Any other average person can overlook maybe what happened. But how do they know that Yosef really doesn't bear a grudge? How do they really know that Yosef wasn't going to come back and take vengeance on the sale, on the embarrassing idea of him being sold as a prisoner into the Egyptian home, and then later again into prison for his misdeeds? Everything is their fault. Why not? And more importantly, this question I think is the most important one, is how exactly did Yosef know that Yaakov really did not send that last will, asking him for forgiveness? Okay, and I think this is the answer. The answer is, I think, because Yaakov did not wonder when he asked Yosef, right? He knew that Yosef forgave the brothers, right? And the reason why is because Yaakov asked Yosef. Where did he ask him? You're going to say, because show me the pasuk. It's not clear. Let me tell you where it is. Let's go back already. Right before Yaakov dies, he blesses Ephraim and Manasseh. Okay? And over here, what does he do? He deliberately gives the younger son the greater honor. Now, this is something that will obviously cause a tremendous amount of sibling rivalry. Right? This time it ends beautifully, right? And we know that Yaakov gives them the bracha and everything works out. Now, this has to be the question. Ready? If Yaakov wanted to give Ephraim the greater blessing and Manasseh the older one, right, the lesser blessing, why did he have to do it in front of Manasseh? Why rub it in his face? When Yaakov's own father Yitzchak was giving out the barachot, did Yitzchak turn to Esav and each brother and say, I'm going to give you this blessing in front of the other? No. Why did Yaakov give these two barachot in front of these two children? Haven't we learned enough about the price of sibling rivalry in the Torah? Cain and Hevel. You have Yitzchak and Ishmael. You have Yaakov and Esav. So many stories of where brothers and the fighting. Yaakov, of all people, didn't know these things. Why did he give in? Why did he do these two barachot in front of them? So, why did Yaakov do it? I think because he wanted to see if Yosef still carried a grudge against his brothers. Well, how did this prove it? Well, when Yaakov gave the younger brother the baracha, okay, he wanted to see how he raised his children. I'll tell you why, because you can't raise children to get along with their siblings if you resent your own siblings. I'll say that again. You can't raise children to get along with their brothers and sisters if you can't stand your brother and sister. When Yaakov gives the younger brother more and saw that the children were okay, he saw that he understood that, at that point he understood that they could only do that, something that no brother can do in previous generations, and that's simply because they love each other like brothers. And the only way they could learn each other like brothers was from a father who, in spite of all of that he had gone through with his two brothers, in spite of the challenge of being sold or bearing a grudge, he still loved them deeply. And the reason why he was able to do this is because Yosef knew more than anyone else that he was not in control. It's all Borei Olam. Let God. Don't worry. Let God do his thing. Now, if you wanted to know if your children are going to succeed in life, you have to teach them how to get along. And the only way they could learn how to do that is to show them how it's done. Right? We know that the world around us is crazy. There's never been a time more clear in our history where people, as Jews, need to band together, irrespective of how different we all are. We need to love each other. And the way in which we strengthen our people is by strengthening our family ties and bonds. You have sibling rivalry, you have some issues with parents, figure it out. Time is short. Time is very short. Do what you can to love one another. I'll end with the following. Gemara in Sanhedrin tells us that at the end of times, there's going to be a lot of challenge, and the world's going to go through all kinds of evil and upheavals and challenges and pain and suffering. But the only way, Gemara says, that you can go ahead and pull yourself out of the challenge of the Yemot Mashiach, the challenge of the birth pains of Mashiach, the Messianic time, is through two things. Number one, Talmud Torah. Engage in developing yourself spiritually. And number two, Gemilat Chasadim. Doing kindness. Kindness begins at home. Kindness begins with a spouse. Kindness begins with a brother. Kindness begins with a parent. Kindness begins with a grandparent. Kindness begins with the people closest to you. Not going to some shelter. Go to a shelter. Go to a soup kitchen. B'chavod. Go travel and build a school in Nicaragua. Okay, for poor children. Do all of that. But not at the expense of recognizing that true Gemilut Chasadim starts at home. You want to build a future? You want to be a better, greater human being? You can't build relationships with Borei Olam if you can't build a relationship with siblings, with friends and community. You can't build a relationship with people if you can't build a relationship with spouses and the self. Build on being better. Love one another in the same way that an Ephraim Menashe did. And the ketz will be revealed. The reason why Yaakov couldn't reveal the ketz is because of sibling rivalry. We're in Galut today because of sibling rivalry. We're in pain, and we're as Jews, we get harassed and embarrassed today in 2023 because of sibling rivalry. The way we fix it is by truly learning to love one another. How do we learn to love one another? Fix your family, my friends. Wishing you all a Shabbat Shalom Mevarach. May we be blessed with the power of loving one another, of seeing the fruits of our labor, of giving our children what they need to achieve their unique goals, finding our basher so we can make our own children, inshallah, sooner than later, and give them the ability of making the future a better, brighter future, a cohesive joint future where we could see the ketz, the end of a united front, a united world. Sending you all lots of love. Thank you so much for listening.